policy formation of the period that I was both as a member and as a staffer on Sarah Lott's staff was during the early competition policies as it related to our networks, cable, satellite, long distance, internet backbone, the early CLAT and fiber companies. And I had the good fortune of working with my friend Colin Crowell, who was a staffer on the House side with now Senator Markey, then Congressman Markey. Mignon Clyburn, who is with us today, who is working in South Carolina as a public service commissioner, and then as a commissioner of the FCC, and eventually as the chairwoman of the FCC. And over the last year, Encompass, which is the association I now lead as CEO, which started 40 years ago in the early competition policies of our networks. And each decade has brought about a new technology, or a new application, or a new revolution. But there are certain consistent principles and certain consistent processes that we believe can lead to good policy. And so Encompass in the last year, as our companies who now represent both the content application AI development, the streaming, the over-the-top, the leading tech companies on one side of our membership, and on the other side of our membership is all of the digital infrastructure, whether that is competitive fiber, 5G, LEO, low Earth orbit satellite, data centers, so the digital infrastructure that is the supply side and the demand side of the market, all of the content, and now all of the AI. And that's what makes Encompass unique. Two things make us unique. One is we are the first and valuable voice and the continual voice of competition and innovation. And the other thing that makes us distinct is that we're not just one stovepipe, we are the entire ecosystem of the infrastructure and the technology, and that is unlike any other association. And that's why we think that we're uniquely positioned to bring together industry leaders, thought leaders, university and academic leaders around the new policy formation around AI. If we look in a historical context, in the midst of World War II, we had a nuclear race. And during that period of time, we established very quickly, and with a national purpose and a national urgency, the nuclear programs and the Department of Energy laboratories. During the Cold War, we established the infrastructure that would send a man to the moon, and the NASA infrastructure from Houston to my home state of Mississippi, the Space Center, to Huntsville, to Cape Canaveral, and we put together the organization and the infrastructure very quickly to achieve that mission. During the pandemic, the company decided that we would bring broadband to all citizens and connect everyone, and we're still in the process of that. The question for us in AI that has just emerged over the last 2 years, what is the right way to promote the most maximum competition, maximum innovation, maximum ways that through open source and proprietary and closed models that we give the market the full, vibrant range of applications. And we believe that this is the American strength. That unlike Europe, which takes a regulated and planned approach, or China that takes a high control, state controlled approach, that the American entrepreneurial, innovative, full competition model is the best way for us to win the AI race. And how to do that in a way that simultaneously addresses the key supply chain or input of what is creating or being our AI serving as a catalyst for an energy revolution. So as we look at the fiber digital infrastructure that we're rapidly deploying, how do we now upgrade, modernize our grid, our transmission, our energy supply, and have an all of the above energy policy so that we have abundant energy to meet the enormous demand on AI? And then how do we have, and Mignon will talk about this, how do we educate and train our workforce so that every American in every place, in every community, in every corner of the country can take advantage of this tremendous opportunity and what we believe will be the prosperity that can come from it. And as Senator Wicker comes in just a little while, how does this serve our national interest and national security, and how does it promote cybersecurity as we do so. So the report that we're launching today, and the AI Center, this unique coalition that we've assembled, and the advisory council that we built over the last year, is to this national purpose. But taking from the lessons of each decade, each generation of technology, so that we can win this race just like the previous generation did. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mignon Clyburn and then to Colin Crowley.
Thank you, Chip, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to try that again. I'm from the deep south. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. I knew you would call and response. We stand at the precipice of a technological revolution driven by artificial intelligence. AI is reshaping our business and industries, our national security framework, and our daily lives. But in order for AI's benefits to reach its highest, greatest, and most inclusive potential, our nation must foster a competitive AI landscape that serves not only business, industries, and government, notably national defense, but consumers in the broader U.S. economy. So just how can we create an AI ecosystem that balances national security, competition, innovation, and fairness? I have an answer for you. That is one of the questions, as you know, one of the sparks that ignited the establishment of Encompass's AI Competition Center, which will work to promote a competitive, trusted, and innovative AI ecosystem for the benefit of all Americans. AICC's inaugural report, strategically produced in consultation with its members, industry leaders, and experts in the field of AI, highlights a unifying objective to develop the kind of framework we believe appropriate to ensure that the U.S. remains safe and secure, prosperous, and innovative. Key objectives were embraced in the furtherance of AICC's mission, promoting a vibrant national AI ecosystem, embracing open and fair competition, driving economic growth and empowerment, advancing the public interest, and championing U.S. leadership. In a few moments, you will hear industry leaders highlight 4 key policy areas: the economy, infrastructure, national security, and legal protections. And in addition to the many obvious policy questions addressed head-on in the report, its attention to policies that tackle AI for everyone, goals that improve digital access, AI objectives that seek energy independence, and policies that promote upskilling and the retention of workers, as well as the revamping of our education system to prepare a new generation of workers that are AI literate and ready, are intentional. What is clear is that the time is now. A senator is in the room, so I don't know if you want me to pause or if you have a few moments.
Well, you go right ahead.
Okay.
I'm learning by the minute.
Oh, I intend to teach. Thank you. What is clear is that the time is now for this conversation and for it to take place in the halls of legislative power serves to deepen our objective to leverage AI's best qualities and further enable opportunities to develop a solid policy framework with combined solutions coming from lawmakers, policymakers, civil society, and marketplace participants. National challenges require a national response. And if there is anything that has stayed with me since my days of serving on the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, it is this. From our GPS apps to our voice assistants, we are surrounded by AI and are using it each and every day. The AI landscape is evolving at a rapid pace with no signs of slowing down. If we fail to collectively address and tackle the ways we may be lagging behind, then existing gaps will widen, and international competitors will exploit our vulnerabilities. We must continue to connect everyone to the digital future, and the U.S. must continue on the path of getting access to everyone so that we will have AI for everyone. It begins, processes, and ends with people. Building trust and justified confidence in our AI systems, the responsible development and fielding of AI. I could go on, but the senator is giving me the sign. But I will leave you with this. We must strike the appropriate balance when it comes to our AI future, and that will only happen if we do so together. And now, I will use the balance of my time. I guess I will leave the balance to the leader, who will yield the balance of his time to the most important person in the room. From the state of Mississippi, said the most important person in the room from South Carolina is about to take her seat.
It's my great honor to introduce our next speaker, my friend, Senator Roger Wicker.
Thank you.
And so without further ado, I'm going to let him take the podium.
Thank you, Chip, and thank you, Commissioner. Goodness, if I tell you everything I know about AI, I'll be out of here in a jiffy. But AI is all the rage. Did anyone see Fox News Sunday? Spent most of their time talking about AI. Had Condoleezza Rice on, and she said it is the most important technological arms race, which raises my tentacles as the incoming chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Wall Street Journal just last week published an article about how Google's entire business is being threatened because rather than Googling something to find an answer, as I've been doing now for 20 years or so, people are turning to AI and putting that sort of thing at risk. This is a very important topic for someone like me on the Armed Services Committee, someone who's determined for us to continue having peace. And that peace is going to be through strengthened weaponry and ammunition and technology, but also in artificial intelligence. Of course, all of you know that artificial intelligence has been around for a long time, for all but 1 year of my lifetime. I was born in 1952. IBM did some sort of machine learning. I was born in 1951. IBM did some sort of machine learning in 1952. Then what big event, somebody help me, what big event happened in 1957? What made me so? But I've got the Cornell, Professor Cornell, engaged in artificial intelligence machine learning there. Now, Senator Stennis, who's long since gone, was chairman of the Armed Services Committee in the Senate beginning in 1969, from 1969 to 1981. When he took office in 1969, a very popular and interesting and innovative movie had been released about outer space and about artificial intelligence. Anyone, I mean, I know everyone here is so young, but anyone want to take a guess about what that movie was? It had already been released. 2001, A Space Odyssey. The old gentleman right here on the front row looks an awful lot like a Pickering. Knew the answer to that. What was the name of the artificial intelligence machine?
HAL 9000. HAL 9000.
I thought everybody would know how, but to know HAL 9000, I bow down. And, that's yeah, absolutely, and it keeps going. Did anybody see the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence? It was, yes, it was released in the year 2001. Maybe Steven Spielberg was waiting till that particular year came about. And here comes my good friend and Eddie, I'm almost finished here. But that was, Ed, you remember the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg? Yes, the actors were Haley Joel Osment and Jude Law, and it dealt with an artificially intelligent boy, but the question, the subject matter of that entire film was whether this AI human boy could be made to feel love. Go back and watch the movie and see how that turned out. And of course, I don't know if any of you have read Cloud Cuckoo Land, a recent important book involving a group of people who are getting on what they believe is a spacecraft and going to a distant galaxy. It's going to take years and years and years. And there's a little girl who's the only survivor on that craft, and she is guided by an artificial intelligence voice named Sybil. And the little girl, Constance, is told when to wake up, what to eat. They don't cook things, they print them, like in AI printer. And anyway, so we're all about artificial intelligence. And let me just tell you, we know some people believe that we'll never ever build another human flown jet aircraft. That they'll all be flown as drones, flown by someone standing on the ground and flying that drone miles and maybe even 1,000 miles away. It's a fact. We've gone further than that. There are F-16s, United States fighter jets, that are being flown by AI. Now, to rest your mind, there is a human pilot in there, sort of like a driver's training coach that's in there with you. But yes, the AI completely flies the F-16. There's not somebody on the ground doing it. And soon that student, teacher, pilot will not be in there. So we're getting there. And so, for people like Ed Markey and Roger Wicker, we're going to have to be mindful of this, and we're going to need people like you and the people in this crowd, like Encompass, to tell us what to do. It seems to me, Senator Markey, that we need legislation to encourage innovation, not stifle it. We must work with the big guys, and we must pass legislation that works with the small startups too, and doesn't give an advantage to people who are already there. We've got to find applications for education, applications for the battlefield, and of course, commercial applications. So I am eager to cooperate with advocacy groups like Encompass and like all of you who are here in industry and in government, and listen to the people who really know what they're talking about, including the staff members of mine that are lined up against the wall here. Thank you for making me think for just a few moments about Ed Markey. He's my very good friend, and I've got pictures.
And you know, Roger is like the latter-day descendant of Trent Lott, with whom I partnered on drafting the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Mississippi and in Massachusetts, you know, Blue-Gray Alliance, and it continues to this day. And you know, Roger, went back in 1993, when I was able to move over 200 megahertz of spectrum, because everyone had a black rotary dial phone or a very primitive cell phone. The goal was to have a computer in everyone's pocket, which by 2005, this kid from Palo Alto figured out how to do it, Steve Jobs. So we have this incredible device. And actually, even as I'm speaking right now, at the beginning of my speech, I can see that several people are not even listening to me, but they're looking at me. And my goal ultimately was that, people would never look up again. All these people would get back to their devices. That's the kind of evolution of where we are. And the same thing is true, Roger, when I was in basic training in Fort Huachuca, Texas, Fort Huachuca, Arizona, in the summer of 1969. And you only get off really on Saturday night. And so I went to see this movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And Hal was the key figure in that movie. And that was the earliest movie version of artificial intelligence, right? And again, what our dream is that Roger and I, we have a dream that Hal actually gets so evolved that within another 40 or 50 years, Hal can now run for Congress and say, I've got the right answers to anything that you want to know, right? So it's just continually evolving into something which is beyond our ability right now to fully comprehend, and an acceptance by each succeeding generation to this new world. For example, I have a personal relationship with Siri. She gets me everything I want every time I ask for her. It's a very close personal friend now.
I'd like to meet that person.
Mine, really, I think she keeps thanking me for moving over the 200 spectrum, 200 megahertz. So I thank Roger, I thank everyone who was here. I want to thank Chip Pickering, the CEO of Encompass, for hosting today's event, and for the kind introduction that he was going to give me, but you interceded with your own. And for decades, Encompass has been on the front lines fighting against incumbent monopolists and advancing policies that promote competition and innovation. As the AI age accelerates, it is no surprise that Encompass has rededicated itself to those principles by launching an AI competition center, bringing its expertise on competition policy to a new arena. And I'm also delighted that former FCC Commissioner Mignon Clyburn and my former staffer, Colin Crowell, are participating in today's event. But we are very fortunate that Mignon and Colin are continuing to lend us their decades of knowledge and expertise. And as Colin knows better than just about anyone, competition has been at the heart of my work on technology and telecommunications policy throughout my career. I hate monopolies. I hate them. And so did Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. That was his key chapter, how much he hated monopolies. Because monopolies hate competition, and competition, as a result, can't in fact produce benefits for consumers and new innovations in technology. So whether it was launching the satellite TV industry to compete with incumbent cable providers in the 1992 Cable Act, or laying the groundwork for the broadband revolution in the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and ensuring that provisions would be included in the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which would guarantee access for new competing companies like Granite and others. That has always been the goal which I have had, to make sure that those monopolies can't squash competition, squash consumers, and just squish the little guy. Today we stand at another technological crossroads, another moment in history where a new technology has captured the public's attention and renewed our faith in technological innovation. There's a lot to be excited about. AI has the potential to transform the way we live and work and interact with the world. New products like ChatGPT have rightfully exploded in popularity and changed the way we view the possibilities and challenges of AI. None of it would have been possible without the 1996 Act. None of it would have been possible without moving over the spectrum in 1993. You needed those revolutions to create this revolution. Brainy computer scientists from Route 128 corridor to Silicon Valley are hard at work building the next world-changing program, or AI-powered model. But if this moment is exciting, it also comes with challenges. Like the stagnant telecom industries of our previous fights, today's incumbents are attempting to leverage their existing market power to dominate a new industry and snuff out startups before they get off the ground. In that sense, AI is the next frontier where we must work to promote paranoia-inducing Darwinian competition. It won't be an easy fight, but Darwin and Adam Smith agreed. The whole key is competition out there. And the strongest are always going to try to completely dominate. We just have to make sure that the startups, the other competitors, are able to survive in that environment. And big tech companies are investing tens of billions of dollars to develop ever more sophisticated and data-hungry algorithms. They have the massive amount of data, computing resources, and financial capital that are essential to develop AI-powered large language models. If we aren't careful, the big tech of today will become the big I and AI of tomorrow, and we will be all the worse for it. Fortunately, at this technological crossroads, we have traffic guards, like Encompass, to point us in a better direction, to ensure that AI stands for all included. And that ultimately has to be the goal. Today's event and the launch of the AI Competition Center is an important contribution to the effort to develop responsible and innovative AI systems that work for all Americans. And I won't pretend to have all the answers, but Encompass and the other commentators have proposed numerous ideas to democratize the AI ecosystem and give startups a fighting chance against the big tech incumbents. I'm especially interested in ideas like ensuring startups have access to the data and the compute necessary to compete with the entrenched AI leaders and promoting the development of open source AI models, training data, and licensing. We still need much more research into these topics, but they are critical steps to creating a robust and competitive AI-powered economy. Because ultimately, competition is good for consumers and it's good for our country. And while we discuss the importance of competition, we must also ensure that the AI age does not come at the expense of marginalized communities, workers, and the environment. When companies use AI-powered algorithms to determine whether a family receives a mortgage or a patient receives life-saving medical treatment, those algorithms cannot replicate and supercharge the bias and discrimination already prevalent today in the real world. We have to make sure that that's the case. And we also need responsible long-term planning to meet and bend the curve on rising AI energy demand without sacrificing environmental and energy justice. Communities shouldn't see their bills spike or their air get dirty because a data center has moved into town. Because when I say that AI must stand for all included, I mean all. I mean everyone in the community has to be benefiting from this. That's why I'm fighting to pass legislation to prohibit algorithmic discrimination and safeguard families' bills and our environment from the growing energy demands of AI. We cannot allow AI to stand for accelerating injustice. To return to our crossroads analogy, Congress faces two starkly different paths on AI policy. Down one path lies an AI future controlled by a few dominant corporations, locking out innovators, stifling competition, and consolidating power in the hands of the few. Down the other path, we embrace a future of fair competition, where AI fuels innovation, creates opportunities for startups, is accessible to all, and democratizes access to the benefits. The choice before us is very, very clear. Will we allow AI to entrench incumbents, or will we build guardrails that empower entrepreneurs, small businesses, and the public? At this crossroads, we must ensure that AI serves not just the biggest, but the boldest, fostering a competitive ecosystem that benefits absolutely everyone in our society, not just those at the top of the ladder. So I thank, again, Chip, and I'm going to, by unanimous consent, include in the record all of the great things Chip was going to say about me, and the Encompass team for today's conversation and helping to pave the way for a competitive AI future. It's a very exciting prospect of looking out to the future. We just have to make sure that we get it right and be the model for the rest of the world, because it's going to get invented here, but the safeguards have to be a part of that invention. So we thank you all so much for all you're going to do to really create this new world.
Senator Markey, I'll be brief because I know we want to move on to our panel next. But the senator talked about the values that are immutable and unchanging in our tech and telecommunications policy framework. And so, looking back, Chip and I became friends originally in the 1990s when we put in place, worked on some of the foundational laws of the 90s for the tech sector. I think when we mentioned the 1992 Cable Act, the 1993 Spectrum Auction Law, the 1996 Telecommunications Act, the 1998 Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998 as the foundational framework for the early internet. I think it's also worth mentioning that Senator Markey was the primary sponsor of those laws coming out of the House. And at the dawn of the 1990s, 90% of the municipalities in the country had exclusive franchise agreements with their cable operators. When we were working on the Telecom Act of 96, 24 out of the 50 states had state laws or state regulations that prevented competition to incumbent phone companies. The Congress of the United States had to engage in extraordinary preemption to crack open markets to competition. And so when you look at the political spectrum from conservative members to progressive members of the House and Senate, where were they able to find common ground? And it was about putting the monopoly era of tech policy in the rearview mirror, cracking open those markets to, as the senator said, ruthless Darwinian, Adam Smith-style free enterprise competition. Democrats and Republicans agreed on that market opening because it would drive innovation. It would give consumers additional choices in the market. It would also put America on its front foot. Universal service had been the key value up until that point, and universal service, making sure that everybody had access to affordable telephone service, was delivered through monopoly provision of service. So even though the technology was changing from analog to digital and the rise of the internet, we didn't throw out the old value. We kept universal service, but we adopted and embraced a new value, which was open competition and open markets to deliver the universal service policies. And so from that standpoint, we also prepared the next generation in that early 1990s era, because the 96 Act also included another provision that the senator worked on, which was the E-rate, which put the internet in every K-12 classroom and every public library in the country by the end of the decade. It was an investment in the future generation, and it was a great equalizer in American education and access to the internet. So now we telescope the time frame, and we are here now at another technological watershed moment. Once again, we're embracing the value of open competition and open markets, but once again, we're not throwing away the old values that we revere and that have served the country well. So as the senator said, AI standing for all included, making sure that we have AI education for all, that we're preparing workers for the changes that AI will bring to the market, and making sure that the next generation not only survives the AI era that we're wading into, but thrives in that era. And open competition is the best way for us to advance the benefits of AI for all Americans. It's the best way for us to be, once again, on our front foot with respect to global economic competitors. And open, particularly open source AI, gives us the best chance to out-innovate geopolitical adversaries for purposes of our national security as well. So Chip deserves tremendous credit for bringing together a robust and diverse group that looks at energy, that looks at the labor workforce issues, that looks at AI education for all, but also focuses once again on making sure that our markets are wide open for the entrepreneurial spirit of the American people and creates a climate conducive to innovation and ongoing investment. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chip. Thank you.
So just real quickly, I want to talk about the process that Encompass has engaged in with Colin and the Blue Owl Group, with Mignon, over the last year. We went out recruiting first an advisory council, and we wanted to make sure that not only would we have industry leaders, but we would have university and academic regional hubs that would come out of that environment, combined with industry and technologists and with engineers, and those who could take a broad cross-section view of each of the elements that we think are important in AI policy and serve as the membership of our organization. So we have Bobby Robbins, University of Arizona, President, Joe Stradinger, University of Mississippi, Richard Hartnett, University of Cincinnati, the Portman Center, each bringing different areas of expertise to the group. We started having dinners, and we've invited Michael Plum, AWS, Global Head of Public Policy, very distinguished public policy background from Senate staff to U.S. Trade Representative, those who represent the fiber industry, the competitive, the CLEC and competitive enterprise business voices. We've invited a panel today that really I think is going to be outstanding, that represents kind of the convening that we've had as the way to bring input and draft the first phase of a report that we're launching today that is always going to be open to the stakeholders and input and the modifications and the changes that will come. And we believe that this first phase report will continually be improved and modified and changed in a way that drives to a consensus and to agreement for the policymakers who have to adopt the best positions and hopefully reach the best agreements in the coming Congress and administration. So this first phase report is a product of a process of bringing together leaders from all over industry, all over the university and academic community. And today we have Teresa Carlson from General Catalyst, who really is a remarkable leader, tremendous career. She's now with General Catalyst, which is the largest venture capital firm in the U.S., promoting small tech, new entrants, new ideas, entrepreneurial activity in this space and in defense and education and healthcare. Really a tremendous example of American capital investment into the innovation that we need in this age. And so Teresa's going to moderate and bring her panelists up. We have a very distinguished panel that I think is very compelling, talking about each element of the report that we're launching today. Teresa, if you'll come up and you can introduce all of your panelists.
I'm president of the General Catalyst Institute, and I have spent 25 years in big tech. I hate using that term, but that seems to be the term that folks are using, both at Microsoft for 10 years and Amazon Web Services for almost 11. And now I'm representing in venture capital, really the startup community. And what you end up finding out is that I worked, my entire business when I grew it globally was predicated on finding the right partners to grow your business, because actually larger tech companies and smaller tech companies need each other to really be successful. And we're in this new age where I think we even have to work together more closely to do what the senator said, which is AI for everyone, right? To make sure that we're making America strong, ensuring that these companies and we have a really distinguished set of panelists here today, super knowledgeable. And what I thought I would do is, Michael, I'll start with you. We're going to get down the road and let each one of you kind of tell you are, what you do, and really how your company is operating today and, you know, thinking about AI and harnessing that. Now, I know that can be a full discussion for our entire panel, so we'll get through this and get to a lot of other topics.
Great. Thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you all for having me and for having this event. It's super exciting. It's been a while in getting it to here. For those of you who don't know me, I work at a CLAC headquartered just outside of Boston. Senator Markey has been instrumental in the company. But we provide voice and data services to multi-site businesses and governmental agencies throughout the United States and Canada at more than 700,000 business locations and governmental locations throughout the country. We've evolved since the '96 Act, where we provided local dial tone service, to now provide predominantly voice and data services over IP services. We provide innovative solutions to those business customers and governmental agencies to make AI a reality for them, to make their businesses and governmental agencies more effective. I think of it as a product that we sell to schools and libraries on buses so that students can do homework and get internet access, but also so that local schools and libraries can administer their facilities in a real way, using all of the benefits that a lot of the companies that are here and involved in the industry are providing. We help facilitate that, but we provide a service in so many locations that we're often able to see inefficiency in the marketplace that we've been advocating for. I'll have some more to say about that.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks so much. AJ?
Yeah, thanks, Teresa, and thanks to General Catalyst as well as Chip and Encompass for this opportunity and this great event. I'm AJ Bedelia. I lead government affairs in North America for Cohere. Cohere is a foundational model startup who builds large language models for enterprise in particular, so for businesses and government in particular. And our primary focus is really on security, privacy, flexibility and deployment, and just generally essentially creating these models and customizing them for what businesses need on a daily basis, essentially. Some of our largest customers are companies like Oracle, who's integrated in something like 100 of their use cases, from payroll to medical records and everything else in between, to Fujitsu, to Cisco and others as well.
Thank you, AJ. Jeff?
Thank you again to Chip, Teresa, and everyone that's been involved in launching this really unique and important event. My name is Jeff Hughes. I'm the CEO of DC Blocks. DC Blocks designs, develops, operates, and owns data centers throughout the southeast United States, where we have a front row seat at dealing with some of the largest social media companies as well as AI deployment companies anywhere in the country. Through these, we interconnect our data centers together with fiber, and through our front row seat, we're seeing the demands of what is required on the electrical grid, not only from the type of energy and the efficiencies of what we have to have, but also from the overall scale and size and scope of how it's challenging our electrical grid and how we as operators have to do that across 7 different states today. We do this and see this in a front row seat from the CEOs of many of the electrical utilities that we work hand in hand with. And there is some really big challenges that are ahead that we must power through, no pun intended, for us to enable AI on a national scope, because it is an arms race, as Senator Wicker was uniquely saying. So thank you.
Carol?
Good afternoon, I'm glad to be here, and I'm Carol Lane, Vice President of Government Affairs for X-Energy. X-Energy is an advanced nuclear design and fuel manufacturing company, And we're designing a reactor in the space that's called Generation 4 reactors. And so what that really means is they're non-light water reactors, so they're very different than the current fleet. And it's some of those features that have the enhanced safety as well as the size of them that are really attractive to a number of the data centers and industrial customers in ways that nuclear hasn't been able to serve those markets before. There's a lot of headlines right now from companies saying that they're trying to either team or partner with SMRs or nuclear. And so why is that? What is it they're seeing that they need? I kind of boil it down to 3 things. It's increased safety, which has an implication on increased public acceptance, reliability, which is really critical to the running of data centers and AI centers, and affordability. So on the safety side, I just want to say that there's, in addition to public acceptance, one of the things that an advantage of these small reactors are that the emergency planning zone around the reactors are way smaller than the current fleet. So instead of a 10-mile radius, we've got a quarter-mile radius. And what that means, and tying it back to a comment Senator Markey made, is that you have a lot more geographic diversity in terms and flexibility in terms of where you can site these reactors. And so you can get to places, it doesn't have to be near water, and you can get to places that geographically you wouldn't be able to site reactors and have them a lot closer to the end users. On the reliability side, our first customer is actually Dow Chemical. We're building our first plant down in Cedar, Texas. And Dow is using both steam and electricity from our plant. They're looking for 99.999% reliability, and we'll give that to them in our plant. So we have a lot of opportunity there. And then affordability, I know there's a lot of concern about the cost of nuclear. And I would just say that while the front-end costs, particularly with big nuclear and even small modular reactors, tend to be higher on the front end, when you look at the life cycle costs out 60 years or maybe even 80 years, it becomes much more of an economical proposition. So I think it's a really important time in terms of the nexus of leadership in AI and leadership in nuclear energy and energy security. So I think it's a really appropriate time to have this discussion.
And I'll just say from what Carol said, the interesting thing about AI and energy is one of the limiting factors right now is you have to go where the power is to build the data centers. And to her point, we've got to be able to expand our capabilities of where power is, and that's hard without going into new forms of energy like nuclear. So super important. Thank you, Carol. Milo?
Thanks, Teresa. I'm Milo Medina. I'm CEO of Logos Space Services. We're building a dual-use constellation, LEO constellation, designed to provide enterprise services to defense and large industry. Multi-gigabit, symmetric service that's designed to be resilient to electronic warfare. Aside from using AI in just our work, I also served on the Defense Innovation Board and helped draft the AI ethics principles that DoD adopted for use in the United States and as advocated with the U.S. allies. Before then, I spent 11 years at Google building fiber infrastructure and got used to dealing with what's necessary to move lots of data around.
Thank you so much. And I should have started by thanking both Chip and Colin and the senators for doing this because it is important. We can do all these kind of reports unless we get an audience and it's meaningful and we make the right recommendations. So we talked about it as a panel, trying to have a good discussion and also making some good recommendations. And I'll just start off by saying, I can see why the senators are always on because this room is so cold. And obviously, you never go to sleep. So it's obviously a ploy in here to keep you awake and energized. So I'm ready to go at this point. So Mike, we're going to start with you, but we're going to make this interactive. We're going to hopefully not make it boring. If you have a question, let us know. But I was going to start with you, Mike. And you all serve over 2/3 of the Fortune 100 companies today. And I think, networking or insights around networking and readiness, AI accessibility, and cybersecurity are crucial. And obviously, a lot has been talked about in this town recently on SALT and the Chinese intrusion of our network. So I know you all have probably been talking about that as well. But how are you all thinking about supporting that, and what's the use of AI in doing those type of capabilities?
Yeah, so there's lots of risks associated with this. The part of the report, which I hope people will take time to read and to review, that we're really focused on in delivering the products and services for our customer base, businesses, multi-site businesses and governmental agencies, is really reinforced by a lot of what we heard from Colin and Senator Markey, Senator Wicker, about starting with smart competition policies with a proven track record of success. The report focuses on open access as one means of obtaining the type of service that's really vitally necessary, because without connection and the ability to communicate with the internet access in the places that it's needed, it isn't just electricity, but there's lots of places today throughout the United States where school systems lack the ability to get online, where post offices can't provide the type of services that customers need because they're not able to connect to the internet at the speeds and with the reliability that they need. There's networks that are being built. There's new products and services, the satellite, the cellular communications are coming into play. But behind most of that, or a lot of that development, is basic forms of connection to the internet that really provide the backbone to a lot of the advancements and a lot of the improvements that we see. It's wonderful that a school system in rural Kansas has access to a lot of the systems and a lot of the education techniques, but if the school can't provide real-time access to the internet, those lessons are lost. So too for defense agencies, where there is not adequate facilities built in to military bases in rural parts of the country to provide additional access to those services. And even to retailers, we provide services to, as you mentioned, 2/3 of the Fortune 100, but in a lot of ways, the platform and the connections that exist for those types of businesses are for the rural small business, the small retailer, the small healthcare service provider that needs the connections to the internet and the ability to obtain it through a competitive marketplace. The open access procedures would help to ensure it isn't just competitive local exchange carriers like Granite, a startup in 2002. It's been advocating for this recently. It's significantly larger and more established players that see how the marketplace is developing. T-Mobile, for example, has been advocating for open access. AT&T, within the past 6 months or so, has also advocated for open access to help it expand its geographic footprint where it can provide services and to provide end user customers, both residential and businesses, with a better use case. And so the open access policies that are recommended in the report, we think are really critical and something worthy of a lot of support as those policies work their way through the legislative branches.
Super important, Michael. Thank you so much. Jeff, I'm going to turn to you. DC blocks is, you're very much at the forefront of what's going on in the energy question right now. How do you think that we should be thinking about the balance today between how we modernize the grid, the pressure that we have on constantly policy around energy security and our ability to actually utilize AI. Are those different things? Are they combined? Should we do them all at the same time, or does one have to happen before the other?
Very good questions. First off, modernizing the grid is of national security importance as well as critical to the future development of what we need to drive economic commerce. It's really a cornerstone in regards to energy across America and enhancing our economic viability, whether it's GDP or global consumer spending or market dominance. The energy demands have surpassed utility integrated resource planning in exponential factors over the course of the last few years, and it's happened very quickly. The energy corporations or the energy companies we deal with, some are state-owned utilities, some are independent cooperatives, some are large conglomerates like Southern Company and others. They file an integrated resource plan every year, and it has been relatively flat for the course of the last 20 years. It's really modest growth, but now they're seeing 3 to as much as 8 times higher than what their integrated resource plan has provided. One way to try to solve some of this is understanding the regulation, the permitting, the environmental concerns, public comment periods, arbitrary lawsuits, and other things that are necessary or actually delaying some of the baseload projects that cause uncertainty of what is happening in the equity markets or the impacting job growth and economic development projects. The reason is because it slows a lot of these things down. Just for the case of what we've heard about SMRs, talking to one utility CEO, his comment was, it's going to be 12 years before we have that. 12 years is too long. 12 years is too long to try to sustain the existing electrical grid. If I think of energy security and where we are, as we've learned through the oil markets, whether it's OPEC, or oil embargoes, or trade-offs, or consortium control, U.S. must achieve energy independence in order to attain true energy security. It's key to our overall dominance of what we have. Supply chain manufacturing, the needs of creating either incentives or other things for companies who are making transformers and are making some of the key utility areas of what need to be done. Maybe there's ways to establish possible incentives from legislative side on a state-by-state or national basis. Concerted efforts need to be made regarding SMRs, as we will hear a little bit from Carol and some of the things of what they're doing. I think we're in the mode of a nuclear renaissance area or era for what we're trying to do, and it needs to be considered along with opening other things like some of the largest national nuclear waste deployment is at Yucca Mountain needs to be looked at, and how do we handle things along those lines. Whether it's base loads and tracking permits to get those done faster for the utility companies and the IRPs and less bureaucratic can certainly help. And I even think the DOE should consider some low interest loans or other base load capital investments by the utility companies to help accelerate where we are. Lastly, AI competitiveness is really key. Other countries do not play by the same rules that the United States does in either the regulations or restrictions in regard to data and data sovereignty. Over-regulation of AI would hamper and diminish the U.S.'s competitiveness with the world marketplace. We must win this. We heard Senator Wicker talk about the defense industry and ensuring that we're doing this and flying F-16s with more AI related and soon to be purely off of AI and a drone more or less environment. We are controlling it from thousands of miles away. Over-regulation in AI in the U.S. could cause the U.S. to suffer at the hands of our competing nations, and even more so from U.S. adversarial nations. This is key for China and key for a lot of areas. This is truly an arms race. And the U.S. needs to maintain this dominant position in the AI race in order to exert influence, direction, control, development in the investments in the AI marketplace. This is a war that we must win, or an initiative that we must win. Finally, overregulation and impact, I think, is really key. We can't stifle growth. We have to invest in companies who are creating the large language models and then selling or providing those back to data center operators that house those computing infrastructures that allow the fast development of these to take place. Overregulation in the U.S. could be considered one of the reasons that many of our once prominent industries in positions in oil and gas, chemical, electronics, automotive, aerospace, and even life sciences moved overseas. We can't afford that. We can't afford to experience some of the same things in supply chain issues that we had in 2020. And finally, overregulation in the data center market could have the very same effect on the industry. It's so vital that the investments that are made by the data center providers, whether it's substations, whether it's providing transmission upgrades, partnering with the utilities, we can't stifle this. It's so vital to our leadership and dominance across the marketplace that we have to find ways to accelerate our growth, not stifle. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really important. I'll just say, when you think about the build of data centers, there's a couple of really key points that were made here. You need networking, you need power. And today what happens in the data center build, they kind of crowdsource. They remind me of, when your 5-year-olds are playing soccer and they run around together. That's kind of how the data centers end up getting built in, in clusters, and neighborhoods don't always like that. This is why if we diversify our energy sources and networking is set up properly, we'll be able to stay super competitive and have these data centers in different locations. And at the same time, potentially have the sources closer to even the applications that are required. But building on that same thing, Carol, how will innovation how's the innovation in nuclear safety? This was a big issue. A lot of people I know, like even 3 or 4 years ago, were like, nuclear's not safe, we can't use safe, you can't really take advantage of it. So how is that going today? And how are you working on more modular development with SMRs? You talked a little bit in your opening about the small nuclear modules. And then I'm throwing a lot in here, but where are we compared to China? We talked about that a little bit on our panel discussion. And what should we be doing to make sure that we're ahead of China, not behind China when it comes to nuclear power development?
Okay, so I'll start with safety, and I actually don't have my fuel source here, it's of course. But the designs today are really different from what was developed 60 years ago. And I mentioned the fact that the Gen 4 reactors don't have water in the reactor core. They're also designed to shut down by themselves without human interaction, so that you don't need, if electricity gets cut off or there's some human error, the reactors will shut down automatically because of the way they're designed. So there are a number of features, and they differ a little bit depending on what kind of technology it is. But there are different features, all with these Gen 4 reactors, that provide a safer environment that's recognized by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and is allowing them to make the decision to say it's okay to be safe within 1/4 mile of the user versus 10 miles of the user. So they're fully recognized in terms of the actual safety. In our case, it really has to do with the fuel itself and the containment of the fissile material that is inside the reactor core. So I can spend a lot of time on that, but I think when we talk about that within the communities, it does help them understand that, to go back to one of, I think it was a Chrysler commercial, that this isn't your father's car. It's a different reactor. In terms of modularity, so one of the things that we're doing is we have 4 reactors to a plant. So each reactor is 80 megawatts, 4 of them is 320 megawatts. What that allows us to do is give the reliability that data centers and other industrial customers really need. So for example, you can, we don't shut down for refueling. You can, have one reactor have some maintenance and the other 3 still operating. So there are ways of working operationally that allows you to enhance the reliability of the plant itself. And then we're also looking at modular construction, meaning, you know, a lot of the costs of the big reactors that we've built today have been because we've had to build everything on site to very specific earthquake and other environmental and geological conditions of that particular site. If you can envelope them and build reactor core and major systems in a plant and bring them to the site and assemble them on the site, that's going to save a lot of both time and money. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at from a modularity perspective. And finally, on your question on China, we are way behind China on this. So it's, there are, just to give you a couple numbers, there are 59 nuclear reactors being built globally today that are under construction. 25 of them are Chinese, none of them are US. And so we really, if we're talking about energy security and the strategic value of nuclear energy to both our country, our national security, and our relationship with foreign countries, we need to bring up that, you know, we need to have the products and the companies and the supply chain to enable that to happen.
And I just, on that, Carol, I think it'd be really interesting for Ray, we chat about this a little bit, and you were touching on it. Why are we behind? What's the key reasons? Is it capital? Is it technology? Is it awareness? You know, is it all the above?
So I would go back to something Jeff said, which the basic reason is that our electricity market hasn't grown in 20 to 30 years. And so the electricity companies and the utilities haven't needed to build new capability and capacity. And so that has stifled, I mean, we've just built 2 new nuclear reactors, and the first 2 reactors we've built in 30 years. And so it's really, while there's been, and I don't mean this in a small way, but there's been growth with the transition to clean energy in solar and wind and some of the renewables. The upfront capital costs of nuclear has not made it as attractive. Plus there have been incentives for solar and wind that there weren't for nuclear until the IRA. And so that has allowed some of the renewables to grow and fill some of the gaps that have been starting to grow with the utilities. So it's really been driven by our electricity demand, I think, versus.
And one last just quick question. Can you share from the time a project, somebody says go, until you roll it out, what's the time frame? How long does it take?
So right now, so we're talking about first of a kind plant in Texas, and we're probably looking at 7 to 10 years for the first of a kind. That being said, for some of you might be aware, we just signed an agreement or partnership with Amazon where they want to build 5 gigawatts of one reactor by 2039. In order to do that, we've really got to do these in parallel. You know, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is used to licensing 1 or 2 plants a year, or 1 or 2 plants every 5 years. We've got to get to a point where where they, as a regulatory agency, know how to scale up, and we're doing things differently. So that's going to make the difference between getting from 7 to 10 years down to 4 to 5 years to make these plans happen.
Thank you so much. I wrote the paper at Amazon and told Jeff Bezos originally about X Energy because I said if we don't use nuclear for our data centers, it's not going to work. And people kind of poo-pooed it, and you see where we are today. So, did you have a question?
I did, yes. So, Ms. Lane, excellent presentation, but I wanted to know if there is any sort of crossover, like can AI somehow help I don't know, run these nuclear power plants or to somehow reduce the regulatory overhead and how long it takes to approve these plants so that can AI help us realize any sort of efficiencies in the nuclear power plant?
We're hoping so. We actually do have a simulator that's operating out in Frederick on our plant, and we are looking at AI, where AI could be useful for that. We're also looking at it in terms of maintenance. For example, if you had a fleet of plants out there and you had something going wrong with a particular part, could you do predictive maintenance based on that? And we're actually just starting to work with Amazon both on the design side as well as the operation side. So we're at the beginning of it, I would say. It's kind of interesting. We had a bunch of legislators from National Council of State Legislators visiting our simulator a couple weeks ago. And they were at Calvert Cliffs, which is the Maryland nuclear plant. And I mean, they're still analog. I mean, it's like out of the 1960s where you got these toggles. Yeah, exactly. And so they still have these toggles in the operating room, the operations room. So, I mean, part of it is getting the NRC to realize we've got to go digital. They've got to accept the modeling that goes with the reliability and confirmation and validation of these models for it. So I think we're at the beginning of it, but I think there's a lot of application for it.
Yeah, I just had a question also about if there is also a lack of education for the American public. There's just so much negative association from the 3 Mile Island accident, but I don't know enough about, is it just a combination of NIMBY in addition to fear and lack of education? And if that contributes to it, why hasn't there been an effort to educate the American people more, I guess, on, the necessity of it, or that they shouldn't be as fearful in terms of what their psyche might be versus the reality?
So I think it's a little bit generational, and that we're finding, if you look at the kids that are getting out of college, that where their priority is the clean environment, they don't have the same negative impression of nuclear, and they view it as a clean energy source. So I think that's one aspect of it. Though when we go into the communities, obviously we have people in all different age groups, and that part is educational. I mean, I think people think of nuclear that hasn't changed in 60 years. And so, we did a public meeting down in Cedar, Texas, when we first announced the plant with Dow, and really had to explain how these reactors work differently and what it means, and that's going to take time. And it takes energy to go into those communities. On the other hand, we have people like we had the president of one of the local hospitals who is very comfortable working with radiation because they use it for cancer treatments and things like that. And so it depends on how you kind of get the community together to make them feel comfortable with it. But outreach is a really important thing, and that's a challenge.
Well, clearly we need a whole session on nuclear. But just to level set us all on AI too, there's 3 things that you really have to need. You need to power AI. You need power, you need energy, you need data, and you need compute. And if you don't have those 3 things, which you probably add, you have to have the networking, of course, in there. But in order just to make those elements work, it's meaningful. So Milo, we're going to you. You have really had, you and I have had some lively debates already. I love this before, but you have had a long history already in working in policy. You've been at the epicenter of this for a long time, 3 decades, but you're very young, right?
I'm old.
And particularly as it relates to infrastructure and access. And as you look at the U.S. economy and the rise of China, what's the current state of play, and what does the next administration need to really focus on?
Oh, such an interesting question. First off, I want to piggyback on what you said about what you need for large-scale data centers, right? It's not just space and power and comms, but you need dark fiber. And because especially if you're training large models on vast amounts of the internet, trying to buy capacity is not going to be an economically viable route. And by the way, that's part of the reason why you don't see large data centers in Canada. Even though they have got excellent land, prices are cheap, they've got great pricing from hydropower, but the carriers up there don't sell dark fiber. And so very few of the large operators, hyperscalers, don't put data centers there. because you need dark fiber transport. And so that's a key element, I think, that we should, when we talk about networking, we should mention. It's like dark fiber is what you want.
100%. It's a really good point.
I think the other thing, if you look at, there's a lot of, China thinks of infrastructure as not just a business for their operators, but something that advantages the country. Last numbers I saw for 2022, China deployed 700,000 5G base stations. I think the number came down 700,000. I think the number in 2023 was something starting to wind down a little bit, 575 or 600,000. We have a CTIA, I think, says, but the total number of sites in the U.S. is 450,000. So just give you a sense of the level of investment and infrastructure expansion. And that's part of the reason why, if you look at Nokia and Ericsson, something like 40% of their business comes from North America. And they're all not doing particularly well. But you look at Huawei and how effective they are, and growing despite U.S. export controls. That focus on infrastructure and fiber deployments in China are truly massive. They have let's just say a relatively simple permitting structure when they want access to right of way. Like, I don't think you have neighborhood committees and county oversight and any of the rest of that. More broadly, I think one of the challenges the U.S. has is when we're behind, like in an area like semiconductors, we have the CHIPS Act, we focus like it's an emergency, we have to catch up. But in areas where we're ahead, and we're clearly ahead in AI, oftentimes it's rarely the policy debate is how do you get even farther ahead, right? It could be protecting your lead, but how do you accelerate the gap? And I think that's one of the challenges that we have. When things get very successful, people start worrying about them and how are some of the negative consequences of growth. And so one of the challenges is really about how do we think about where are the key inputs and feedstock, not just hardware, but also intellectual property, open source, infrastructure, et cetera, that can enable AI to be development to be used by a wide variety of people and wide variety of businesses. Again, on infrastructure, I spent 11 years at Google. I think of the data center in Council Bluffs, it's 1,000 acres in size. And they have buildings that are a football field in size, 4 stories tall, and filled with hardware. And Google's a licensed energy utility. They buy and sell energy directly off the grid. So there's a lot of advantages if you're operating at that scale. Jeff, I think you'd love to be able to buy and sell energy directly off the grid, right? And
we are starting to do that
in
certain areas with some cooperatives where we participate within that energy
Right.
buy. And so it's really engaged into the open market. But they're taking a lot of that energy. It's only available from gas right now. So the LNG plants and ensuring that you're getting enough of that out there fast enough is really critical.
So one of the key elements in infrastructure policy is you've got large actors have access to capital and can build at massive scale. And they can do things in terms of access to land and infrastructure for electricity transmission, fiber, that smaller players in the U.S. don't have access to. That's one of the things that drives the asymmetry in terms of startups in various layers because
It takes a lot of capital.
it takes a lot of capital to do that. I actually think if you just look at the amount of investment going into AI today, capital is not really the constraint. It's really about how you organize that capital and deliver capability with it. And so I think trying to be thoughtful about looking at what are the feedstocks that are important and how to make sure we don't have bottlenecks in those feedstocks for both small players and large players alike is going to be important. And these things are not necessarily obvious. But I would end by saying, just imagine 5 years ago, the headline that says Microsoft cuts deal to reactivate 3 Mile Island. Just think
Crazy, yeah.
about the kind of environment we're in now, when these things don't surprise you. But
It's a good idea.
they might even think it's not the U.S. government driving nuclear now, it's hyperscalers driving it, which is just something is wrong, right, when you've got that kind of headline.
Well, I think to your point, we're at a tipping point where technology innovation is driving this. And I just want to, I know everybody knows this, but around the world, it's why we are the most innovative country in the world. I've seen so many different countries try to build, as an example, their own clouds. And they say, and they just can't do it, mainly because they don't have the same innovative spirit, and generally they also do not have the same capital. And thirdly, it is usually a regulatory barrier, because when you were talking, I was thinking about when I was in the Middle East trying to negotiate the UAE early on with networking, and you have a duopoly of networking, and it's impossible to just have that. And here we have open, we have a free market, and we probably don't get it all right by any stretch. But look at us here today, really trying to drive a conversation to make sure that we are having a discussion and working through the issues. And I'm going to turn it back to AJ, who is building and working with these large language models, that you're in the deep of the technology here. I love what you're doing, and you're focusing on this business adoption and working with the next administration. So here, you're building these foundational models and exclusively for enterprises, which I think is a lot of people don't understand. A lot of these today are not built exclusively for enterprises that you're using. They're not really built for this. You're doing something really unique. So, what do you think the next administration now should do to address any of the concerns around AI that you're seeing from the enterprises?
So great conversation. I'm going to try and pull together some of these threads as well. But I think even taking a step back here, it's important to understand there's a lot of noise about AI out there. A lot of just conversation about what it can do, what it could potentially do in 30, 40, 50 years. But we're really focused on adoption today. And I think just number one, it's having that honest conversation about what businesses are using it for. And I think the assumption is we have these chatbots. You got a doctor in front of a chatbot asking you questions. The actual adoption use cases, particularly for businesses, is integrating into an existing workflow. And so I think that's where we're going to see the next 5, 10, 20 years. It's not going to be these all-powerful, super intelligent things. It's going to become so built into people's applications and use cases, you're not even going to notice it's happening. So good examples of this is a doctor, and this is true right now, in production use cases that are here. A doctor will be looking at a patient record, be a summarization text box at the top that will summarize a 50-page patient record. As you can imagine, that's really useful. And you can use that example a million times over, right? Writing job descriptions, thinking through, we're in use for a lot of intelligence agencies, so summarizing and multilingual and so on and so forth as well. And so number one, I think just adoption and how it's going to look is going to be very different than what I think people see today, and certainly what people assume is going to be the case as well. We spent a lot of time working with a lot of Fortune 500 companies talking about these use cases, working through some of these things. I think challenges and barriers and blockages, there's kind of 3 big things I think about here. The first part is kind of just a lack of trust in the system and in the technology generally. So that's things like privacy and security and verifiability and cybersecurity generally. And those are really important partially because as you think about it, if you're a Fortune 500 CEO and you start building or creating an application for AI, you're going to be very worried about things like data leakage. Right? These aren't sexy things, right? But they're number one on top of most IT departments, right? They're going to worry about, is this thing secure? Can it be hacked? Is my data going to get pulled away to China and other parts of the world, particularly if you're in a particularly innovative company? And so I think deeper focus on these issues is going to be extremely important for the next administration. I think what was really remarkable to me is you had 2 senators up here today, and they were talking about the hope of AI. which I think we've lost a little bit of that. The current focus has been very much focused on these doomsday end-of-the-day scenarios. And frankly, I think most technologists will tell you that we're pretty far off from that, and that we should be talking about public policy adoption questions that address some of these concerns that these CEOs might be thinking about. And that goes to my next part, which is the second area where I think a lot of businesses think about is uncertainty. They don't have certainty about what laws and existing regulations apply to AI. In a lot of cases, AI use cases aren't that much different than current applications. So do we need new laws and new regulations, or do we just need some clarity in nature of it, right? The report does a really good job of talking about patchwork regulation and what that looks like for a company like us. We're 400 people. That's smaller than Google's Government Affairs shop, to give you a sense of the size. And so for us, we're really focused on having these standardized definitions, these seamless workflows where we can answer the kinds of questions we get from Oracle or Cisco or so on and so forth, some of our biggest clients, because I think it should be in everyone's interest for this country, the most innovative companies in it, to the government, to be adopting these things as quick as possible to win the race, frankly, across the world. And then the third part of this is really expertise. I think there's a real lack of understanding and expertise at companies and government and so on and so forth. And frankly, actually, for us, we failed a lot of our point of concepts last year, something like 90% of them. And the major reason for it was because we would find that folks would sign up with us, and then they would use it for a couple of weeks and then kind of not fully appreciate how to configure or do the kinds of prompt engineering or fine-tuning that comes along with it as well. And so a lot of workforce development is going to be absolutely necessary. People look at it in the negative, but I look at it in the positive. I think there's going to be a ton of work that's going to have to come in workforce development and helping build this new workforce in the future that integrates these models just generally. I'll make a final point on energy. I think a big part that people don't think about is they say, oh, these LLM developers are training all these models and it takes so much energy. That's actually not where most of the energy usage is coming from. These guys will agree with me here on this. That's actually pretty easy to plan out, right? You know you're going to train at this certain period, you can find it. I mean, there's still not a lot of excess power, to be clear. The biggest problem is actually inference. Inference is literally when you make the query of the element. And that's not predictable. And that's the biggest problem that we face, frankly, even working with a lot of our customers is how do you get power in a situation that's not predictable? You don't know when the doctor's going to look at that medical record, right? Is it 8 a.m. or is it 7 p.m.? And so there's a lot of questions, I think, particularly as you think about power. It's not as much about training as it is about inference and how we're actually putting those LLMs in place generally. But look, big picture, it's about streamlining. I think everyone has said this about power, about energy and electricity to China. I think it's about removing some of those blockers, clarifying the existing regulation. There's this overwhelming focus on all these speculative questions, creating pre-deployment testing. No, I think we just need to clarify existing regulations and create some single rifle shot things that fix some of these issues. We don't need technology-wide regulation on this.
Really, really good points. I'm going to just spend like 45 seconds and talk for just a minute a little bit about how General Callis is thinking about this, and then I'd like to pause for a minute and see if you have any more questions. Otherwise, we just have some general topics. But I wanted to just share, I remember, 5 years ago, 6 years ago in this town, you really wouldn't have seen venture capital or transformative kind of companies here on a regular basis. And that's changed a lot in Washington, D.C. And I think it's an important element for these discussions because when you think about venture capital and creating these kind of companies, we want America to be the ones that sees these transformative technologies first. And one of the things I always worried about when I would come up here and talk to our lawmakers is that we weren't showcasing our most innovative. When I was at Microsoft and Amazon and Splunk, the larger companies, of course, have this nailed. They can come in, they have good conversations. But it's really important for the really innovative, these companies that are thinking how they layer and build on top of even the large models. What are they doing? How are they being created? And I'll tell you today, I'm blown away by some of the companies that I'm seeing from healthcare use cases around AI that gets to the most rural areas of America and around the world to do healthcare, talk to our elderly patients, provide an analysis of veterans and what we're seeing from there. I'm seeing just unbelievable work in the legal realm, which is probably going to be very scary for lawyers because I think there is a lot of work that AI can do around the legal framework, manufacturing, and robotics, how we're seeing the use of AI in these areas. So there are ways, I think, that it's really going to speed up call centers. So we do have to worry about that there will be jobs taken, but at the same time, we can create a lot more jobs. So we have to focus on the positive upside of all this. So for General Catalyst, we're really here because we believe we have capital. We've done a fantastic job raising capital. We have unbelievable companies that we've already backed, and they've gone public, and some that are still trying, and these new startups. But what we've talked about internally, our CEO and I, is we've got to have the right policies, what we've been talking about. And we're at a critical point in time where it's even more important that if we miss on, we don't want to over-create. We may just, to your point, AJ, we can take potentially the policies we have and be additive, but let's be fast and let's not stagnate. And I would say the other big thing is let's not be reactive, because we've also seen when we don't have a policy and something goes the wrong way, we overreact sometimes here. So we want to make sure that we are also ensuring that we can get in front of that. So I'll pause on that and just see any questions from our audience again.
Excellent presentation again, thank you. My question is for Milo. You talked about the importance of dark fiber in these LLMs and training these AI models. I was speaking with Caroline before the presentation started. We talked about how these data centers can go to rural communities and other areas where land is cheaper, and they can set up and kind of invest in the infrastructure. So would you say that there are any barriers, regulatory or otherwise, that stop these AI companies from going, hey, why don't we open a plant in Georgia or Kentucky or somewhere else where we can revitalize the community?
Can I just say I like the Kentucky?
and basically kind of, redevelop these areas.
Yeah, I think getting dark fiber in a local area can sometimes be relatively straightforward if you've had a local operator or co-op, et cetera. The issue is you'll need multiple connections to the rest of the world, and that, what we in the old days would call interlata, right? Like long haul fiber. And companies tend not to want to sell that. There are some that do, but there's not comprehensive, like AT&T, Verizon, even Lumen. Lumen will sell it to you, but they don't really want to. And so the challenge is really about how do you get that infrastructure so that it's connected to enough of the rest of the world built, and then be able to scale the optics up, because you might, if you're trying to cobble something together, you may have a different line system. That's parts running at 800 gigabits, this part's running at, a terabit or 400 gig over here, right? So how do you scale those kind of communication systems up? And that's an area where I think large companies have a lot of advantages, right? When I was at Google, right, Google carries a huge portion of the world's internet on its own facilities because they made just a very concerted effort to get access to those. And if you look at where undersea cables are being built, they're being built by the hyperscalers, not by the telcos anymore. They don't resell them. They use it just for their own purposes. So those are kind of the things where if you want to think about interconnection, long haul, in a rural area, it's not just getting it to one spot. You're going to need to get it to a few locations. And I think some things, it may be that BEAD may help with that. It may be that some states are particularly innovative and trying to build more regional fiber access and interconnections. But it's all over the place. And usually the LEC, which had to go everywhere, they don't sell the fiber. They don't sell dark fiber. So many people in this room can talk to you about the details.
Yeah, let me add one more thing onto that. So, Milo, you're exactly right. And so when you build and operate a facility that is occupied by the top 5 hyperscalers or even some of the other AI enablement companies, and names like CoreWeave and others you'll find that are getting very prominent. As a data center operator, we need to create 4 or 5 distinct, unique paths out of it, which means 4 or 5 paths you can't cross when you're building fiber networks for. And the size of the capacity, since we own and operate what is now one of the largest cable landing stations on the eastern seaboard, and we built a 465-mile fiber network from Myrtle Beach all the way back through Atlanta, and we're anchoring hyperscale data centers all along those. You need to have those 3 or 4 different providers you can get into it, but the size of the fibers are just enormous. We have, I won't say which ones they are, but we have one hyperscaler that said, hey, can you just pull an 864 count fiber cable for me in one of our conduits? And another one is a 432 count fiber cable. And they're like saying, our planning is going to be running out of this. What other available duct do you have to pull more fiber? And then here is the other routes, is what we see is this intersection of where the data center lives versus where the networks lives. Because it all comes down to what AJ was saying. When you build these large training models, that's one thing. When you get the inference models, it's really puts the dependency on the networks. And that's why you're starting to see different aspects happening. It's not a coincidence that you look at the most data centers are out there is Microsoft. But you see where Meta's got 25 of them roughly in the United States and are continually doing more. The lead engineer from Meta ended up going over to Microsoft of how do you build and architect these where they can fail over to each other at the power of the network, not the power of, what's the utility grid happen? If utility grid drops and you need to back up to it or go to a different data center, that puts the dependencies on the network.
Yeah, and I would just say that, just to piggyback on that, when you're doing distributed compute with regards to AI, right, bandwidth between the GPUs or the processing nodes is really important. It needs a lot of cross-sectional bandwidth, which is not the normal compute load that you would find if we're, serving your Gmail, et cetera. So, and it has to be low latency. So that's where you're getting these huge fiber counts because they're being used to stitch together compute fabric and distributing that. And Google would do things where if you had a very hot day in Council Bluffs, it would power that data center capacity down and move that load to a different data center in a different part of the country. You can do that because you have multi-terabits of fiber infrastructure that lets you move it around. And so fiber and compute go together in this world. And you may not have massive 1,000-acre data centers, but if you've got multiples of them that are tightly connected with dark fiber and enough compute, enough fiber count, then you can emulate.
And one of the things I was going to say, at Amazon, we did 10-year capacity planning on our data centers. And also, it wasn't just about how many you had, it was how efficient they were. So you don't want to have a whole bunch of data centers where you have a bad cost structure. So there's a lot of things that play with this, and even with the fiber, it's like how cheap can you get it? Not bad, just like they're looking for efficiency, and not because they're trying to be cheap, because if their costs are high, they pass that cost on to customers too, so you have all these. All right, we're going to do 2 questions, very quick round robin. Question number 1 is going to be, we're going to start with you, Michael. Question number 1 is, what's a recommendation you have for Congress based on our report? And the second question I'll prepare you guys for is, give me a fun fact of an AI tool that you use and you just love. So let's start with you, Michael.
Obviously, the security aspects of all of this was another part of the question that you asked. I don't think I got to that. It has to be. We've been, we provide voice and data services to multi-state businesses, including Department of Defense. There's significant risk there, but there's significant upside too. because unlike for the analog world, where there was really a reactive system, there's far more real-time coverage, real-time ability to fix, to redirect traffic where there's outages or types of issues. You know, there's a lot of network penetration that's coming from foreign adversaries, even for small companies like Granite Telecommunications, which I assume a lot of people haven't heard of. But because of the type of traffic that's going over network connections that we control, it's there. We need to deal with the privacy security aspects. I guess that would be a recommendation. The second topic?
What's your favorite AI tool? Something tool you use?
We have several that we've patented and created. The newest one is what we call an edge boot device. It basically powers on, powers off end user equipment.
Now, is that your favorite tool?
Oh.
What do you use?
I use ChatGPT.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing, not a work, is like
ChatGPT has made my life. Yeah.
All right, AJ?
In terms of recommendation for the next administration, I think the number one thing I can think of off the top of my head is moving away from speculative and more into practical. You know, I think there's an assumption that if you do absolutely nothing, that's great, and the market will do well. But as I mentioned, I think there's businesses sitting on the sidelines. I think certainly the government has questions about what adoption should look like. And so I think clarity is going to be absolutely important for the next administration. And just as importantly, if you do nothing, you still have something like 50 states that are going to try and create their own patchwork legislation. You have Europe that has its EU AI Act, you have the UK, you have Canada. And I think the US needs to lead, and it needs to lead in showcasing what smart, practical adoption looks like. And so that's the first thing, I think, moving away from killer robots and really thinking about some of the questions that businesses really want, because I think there's a hunger for that. Favorite AI tool, I work for an AI company. So I'll talk about my use case, which is we pioneered this concept called retrieval augmented generation, which basically creates a connector to your own documents. And so, when you ask a chatbot something, it'll just give it an answer based on its own internal knowledge base. What is our secret sauce, I like to say, is when you ask our model something, it can base it off of your documentation. And so when I write a brief, I actually can have it based off of things that I've written before. And so that's actually one of my favorite things. I use it every day. It's incredibly helpful. It helps me get started on various number of things. And I think that's really what the core of these technologies is. It's assistive. It assists you in your day-to-day. And it's simple, stupid stuff to big picture stuff as well.
Very cool. Thank you. Jeff?
So what's the biggest thing or the most important thing in our perspective is we have to utilize our energy resources more effectively and eliminating some of the processes related to permitting natural gas. Solar and wind can't get us there fast enough with the energy demands that we have to have. We're going to need to invest more. I think it's probably a 10 to 15 year investment more into natural gas while you're bringing more things up through nuclear. So I think streamlining that energy policy, investing in, looking at how do you get better ability to permit these plants and get them up faster is going to be probably the most important thing, because they can power the grid and they're very, very effective. At the same time, looking at the legislation around, it's putting a lot of downward pressure on utility companies by retiring coal-fired plants at the same pace of what they've had to do. So maybe relaxing some of that with higher investments into cleaner energy, which natural gas is. And I think that will help us streamline this energy that we're going to need to just power all these data centers and power all these applications that we need for. For me, it's ChatGPT and ChatOn. I use it just about every day, and it's inside our company. We're now utilizing numerous tools to help us with the energy efficiencies in this blend of air and water, because the higher density the data centers are, the most effective way to cool those is via water. But it doesn't mean that you can't cool those with air and utilizing different things and being good on the amount of water usage of what we're seeing and how that also has negative pressures within the markets as well. So
Now, Jeff, that doesn't sound like a fun tool, but that's just a choice.
we're working on it.
I'm going to start with ChatGPT.
Wow.
So, I'm not
Sam's
sure
gonna like
what
all
my
your
total
Microsoft.
range is, but I use that the most often. I did want to say in terms of recommendation, it's kind of interesting in the advanced nuclear space. I started working for X Energy in 2015, and it was just the beginning of advanced nuclear being talked about. In the past 5 years, the Congress has been what I really call policy forward in what they've done for advanced nuclear energy. They've probably spent about $10 billion over the past 5 years. In 2020, they told the Department of Energy to set up a program, pick 2 demonstrations, and go forward with them to get them online by the end of the decade, basically. And we were fortunate enough to win one of them. Bill Gates' company, TerraPower, won the other one. He's building his plant in Wyoming. And the emphasis from the Congress was we need to deploy. We need to stop doing research. We've got enough research. We need to deploy these reactors. So my biggest concern is, we've got to get these reactors deployed. We don't need to switch horses now. I do worry sometimes Congress gets a little enticed by the next shiny object, and we've really got to stick with what we're doing and get them to fruition. And they've really been not just in the funding area, but they've been policy forward in the licensing area, putting a lot of pressure on NRC to license, they call it performance-based, risk-informed performance-based licensing, which means you license to the safety of the reactor as opposed to, just inheriting how light water reactors work. And the Congress has been very forceful and supportive of trying to get getting that legislation through.
So Carol, I'm going to move on because we're already past. I'm going to say for you, remove the red tape. Let's get these things deployed, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Let's see, on the policy side, I would just say, if you're really going to pass something, it should have 2 characteristics. One, they should all have sunset dates in 3 to 4 years, because whatever you pass will be wrong. We need to have the ability to learn, and so putting a sunset date on any regulation, then forcing a reevaluation, which is good. 2, there should be no word salad, right? The regulation should be, or the policy should be clear and narrow. My favorite tool, the AI tool that I use, is Google Photos. And people, what do you mean by that? But it is truly amazing by what you can search in your photos, find, not just people, but documents. And these days, I just take pictures of everything. And then I can find it in Google Photos later. And that single little piece of utility has kept me from losing things and losing access to information.
I love that. I'm going to give mine real quick and then we're going to close that. I'm a national security and defense person. I feel it's still my passion. And I would love to see us cut the red tape so we can take advantage and experiment more with a lot of technologies. Have creative uses of the FAR. Get Congress to open it up, push the agencies to get much more creative. It's there, we can use it, they need to do it. And my favorite tool with my accent is Grammarly. I'm obsessed with Grammarly right now, and it's really fun to use it in what you're writing, because as a Southerner, Chip knows we can never say anything in a short way. But then I look at it, I'm like, is that, oh, maybe that was better. But it's really fun because I like grammar, but I always, again, as a Southerner, we add a bunch of words, but it's fun to see how these things can really help you be more succinct. So let me thank you all you all have been a fantastic audience. You stayed with us the whole time. Hopefully you'll join us. I think Chip still is on afterwards for during. And thank you again to the senators and Chip and Colin and Canvas for hosting us today.
Thank you.